The U.S. Department of Energy is cleaning up the Oak Ridge Reservation of residual hazardous and radioactive contamination left over as a result of decades of nuclear energy research. Much of that work has been influenced by the Oak Ridge Site-Specific Advisory Board, a citizens panel that provides independent advice and recommendations on DOE's cleanup operations. You're welcome to attend the meetings and be part of this important work. For more information,
Get started. Thank you guys for being here. Been a while. Seems like forever since we've had a meeting, so thank you for everybody that's here. So, do we have any comments from federal or state agencies?
No for me, no for today.
Do we? I have put she online.
I've done.
Comments?
Yes.
I'm sorry, yes, it's there, if you just,
Okay. All right.
there she.
Her mic's muted.
Yeah,
She's on. Okay. So.
they're all muted.
Just right, go ahead and make a
Yes.
couple of comments, or is that all right?
Yeah, if you
Yeah.
have a comment, go for it. Yep.
Thank you. Hey, good evening, everyone. It's good to see you here tonight, and it does feel like a long time since we've been at a meeting. So it's good to see all of you both in person and virtually. I think the folks online maybe can only see my arm, but I'm kind of the disembodied voice next to Roger here. You'll see my hands wave every so often, so.
If you wiggle, it may find you.
That's right. That's me. It has been a while since our last meeting, and I think that was back in November. You know, thinking about tonight, I was gonna say a lot has changed since November, but I think that's obvious that there have been quite a few major changes and big things going on in the world since November, and we do have a lot to catch you up on. A couple things on personnel. So Jay Mullis, manager of Oak Ridge office, has retired. So currently I'm the acting manager of the Oak Ridge office. We've also shifted around some of our federal project directors and the portfolios that they're covering. And you may know some of these folks. They may be names that you're used to, or they may be new to you. You'll see them at future meetings, probably providing presentations and other information. But Joanna Harden is now covering our Y12 portfolio. Steve Clemens is covering the Oak Ridge National Laboratory, and Mark McIntosh is covering ETTP. So you'll see more of them in the future. And as we have other personnel things that we need to cover, we'll make sure that we're bringing you updates on those as well. So also understand, since it looks like tonight's theme is really kind of about change and what's changed since your last board meeting. I know you have I have some introductions for your new board members. I think you all just talked, but I'm going to go ahead and go through my notes here that were so nicely produced for me, and I will just go ahead and read these off if that's okay, and a little bit of biographical information. So Lori Clark, got that right, Lori?
Yes.
Yes. Is retired after serving as an environmental safety and health advisor for Bechtel National. She received a bachelor in Earth Studies and completed graduate work in water resources management, and she lives in Oak Ridge. And Lori, I think I worked with you up at Hanford. Were you up at Hanford?
Wow. 11 years, I believe.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, I was up there as well. Worked with Bechtel National a lot. I believe you went to UNLV.
Yes.
I went to UNLV too. It's a small world.
Yes.
Let's see, Lauren La Luzerne. Did I get that wrong?
Yep.
Oh, I was thinking it's either a soft Z or Z.
You got it.
Sorry. Thank you for that. Is on the administrative staff at Oak Ridge National Laboratory. She received a bachelor's in sustainability studies and anthropology and a master's degree in natural resources and global sustainability. She lives in Loudon. Let's see, Otto Mers. Yep. Got it. All right. Is a retired electrical foreman who received an associate's degree in electrical and maintains his electrical license from the state of Wisconsin. Are you a Green Bay fan?
My wife.
And he lives in La Follette. Did I say that properly?
La Follette.
La Follette.
Probably correct for the French, but.
I looked it up and I found at least 5 different pronunciations of that town name. So including Lafayette, which I was thinking, oh no, I'm going to use the wrong one. So Let's see, Melanie Rogers is an assistant teacher at Oak Ridge Schools, where she works with the Wildcat Preschool program at Oak Ridge High School. She received a bachelor and master's in education. She also lives in Oak Ridge. And Kelly Thompson is a partially retired attorney and current nature photographer. She received a Juris Doctorate and a bachelor's in business administration, and she also currently lives in Oak Ridge. So thankful for everybody that has decided to serve on the board, and thank you, and thankful for all current board members and even past members. I understand I've worked with a lot of different boards in the past, and I understand this is a choice you're making because you all have your lives and your families and the work that you do, even in retirement. So this is something that you're doing in addition to that, and I appreciate your service. So a couple of updates. We did have the new Secretary of Energy, Chris Wright, out to Oak Ridge. That was at the end of February. So his visit to Oak Ridge was his second DOE site. I believe Los Alamos was his first. But his visit to Oak Ridge was his first EM site, so which we're pretty proud of that he decided to come to Oak Ridge first. We showed him our cleanup projects going on at Y12. We only had just a little bit of time with him. We were also able to do a roundtable with some industry to talk about land transfers and how that's driving new nuclear and nuclear innovation at the site on lands that we've cleaned up and then transferred to the community. Great discussion. He's talked very highly about his visit, and even to this day, we continue to get questions and inquiries from our headquarters based on that visit. So he clearly has a lot of interest in what's going on at Oak Ridge. Our biggest demolition project at Y12, which is Alpha 2, is moving forward. We had to get some additional equipment to help us manage the debris and spoils piles that we would be creating through the demolition, but we received those pieces of equipment. Also had to do a little bit of equipment repair, but I'm happy to report last week we actually started excavation on the high bay area of that facility, which is really the neat part of demolition for me. I like when the yellow iron gets in there and really starts tearing away at the building because it really says progress, and it's really enjoyable to watch. I don't know exactly why, but watching a building get torn down is just really enjoyable. So, let's see, we're making steady progress on our highest project, highest priority project at Oak Ridge National Lab, which is the U-233. Recently, Isotech was able to get into another waste form of material. We call it RCP06. They've done a lot of preparation to get into that waste form. And thus far, I think they've removed about 40% of the U-233 inventory in the work that they're doing. Also, a really exciting process to watch when you go out there. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers has completed construction at the Interpretive Center. Previously, we called this the K-25 viewing platform. We actually decided last year to call it something different. We found in discussions with our headquarters when we said viewing platform, people had a very almost military view of what a viewing platform is. So if you can imagine kind of a wooden structure with stairs and a railing, right? That's what people were envisioning, not the really amazing facility that we've constructed out there. Next, we're actually going to put exhibits in the building, and we're looking forward to our grand opening, which will be later this year, probably in the September timeframe. We're continuing to transfer clean land at ETT. We just completed a land transfer for about 24 acres. I know that's smallish, but I will remind everyone that to date we have transferred about 1,800 acres in total. There's another transfer ahead just in front of us for about 33 acres, but in total this year, we think we can transfer about 660 acres of land. So a lot of land transfer still ahead for us, which is really good. I know Dennis is actually going to talk a little bit more about this tonight, so I won't steal all of his thunder, but the field work for the second phase of the EMDF project was completed. And with that work finished, we are actually able to begin gathering the groundwater monitoring data that we wanted to. And again, Dennis is going to go into a lot more detail about that. And I think that's actually it for my updates tonight. I could go on and on, but I know time is a factor here, so thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else have any other comments? State, federal? So we're gonna go into our presentation for ongoing efforts to assure waste disposal capacity by Mr. Mayton. Mr. Moore's gonna read his bio.
So Dennis is a senior project manager for the new environmental management disposal facility landfill and existing landfills for the Oak Ridge Environmental Management Office. Previously, he managed the groundwater program. He has also been with DOE since 2015. Prior to his time with the Department of Energy, he was with the environmental restoration manager at the Holston Army Ammunition Plant in Kingsport, Tennessee. Dennis also has previous experience managing environmental cleanup and engineering projects for the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and in the private sector with CERCLA cleanup at Army sites. Dennis has a degree in geology from the University of Tennessee, Knoxville, and he also served in the U.S. Air Force for 4 years.
Thank you. Floor is yours, sir.
Thank you very much. Start with thanking you for having me back again this year. It's really been a long time for me since a meeting. It's been about a year. Man. So let's start here. OREM, we currently operate 4 active landfills. That's allowed us to make great progress on our cleanup here at the site. And then we're also in the early stages of a 5th landfill, EMDF. But the first 4, we just refer to them as landfills 4, 5, and 7. I'll talk about what type of waste they receive in another slide. But those are managed under the Tennessee Division of Solid Waste Management. They're oversight of that. And then our CERCLA landfill, which is for low-level radioactive and chemically contaminated soils, and so forth, is the Environmental Management Waste Management Facility, or we simply call it MWOLF. And the new facility, since MWOLF is about 86% full, that we're in the early stages of construction, we refer to it as Environmental Management Disposal Facility. And then there's a waste acceptance, a criteria that determines which waste can go in which landfill. So this diagram kind of shows what we try to do with our waste or material. At the top there are preferences, of course, not to use up our space and reuse material if we can. And this is type examples of, say, conductor wire from wires from old electrical lines that we take down. We'll reuse recycle some of that. There's some concrete that we're able to bunch up and use for road base and so forth around the landfill. So that's our first option. Then the next option, we try to take our waste to landfills 4, 5, and 7. 4 is a smaller landfill. It's a little less than 100,000 cubic yards, and it can only receive classified waste that would otherwise go in landfills 5 and 7. That particular landfill was though built back in 1989, and it's a little over 50% full at this time. Landfill 5 receives sanitary waste. In addition to that, it receives some sanitary waste from the ORNL cafeteria type food. It was constructed back in 1994, and it's also a little over 50% full now. Landfill 7 is only construction demolition debris, and it was constructed back in 2001, and it's just under 50% full. Landfills 5 and 7 are just over 2 million cubic yards of available space for those landfills. Then for the CERCLA landfills, this one can only receive waste that's considered CERCLA waste, low-level radioactive. It's 2.2 million cubic yards. It started receiving waste back in 2002, and it's about 86% full. Last year when I gave this briefing, we were at 85% full. It was a little bit slow year there, so fortunately we only did fill up 1% over the past year. And then there's some waste that doesn't meet any of the criteria to dispose of on site, and that ships off site, mainly out west. So this kind of gives a little diagram here showing how much volume stays on site. Majority of our waste does remain on site with a small amount going off site, but that on site is really the large volume type stuff, the concrete, the structural steel, the soil cleanup is that. And then the right one kind of gives that. Though between that breakout, most of the radiological activity though does go out west with very little staying on site, CERCLA landfill. So a lot of you probably know the layout of the facility here, but the DOE site is on the southwest portion of the city of Oak Ridge. There's 3 main sites that OREM is cleaning up. Here, the first being ETTP, that's kind of on the west side. that was where all of our first effort was, and all the buildings now are down. The soil is cleaned up out at that site, and we've moved to the Y12 area and the OR&L area at this time. The landfills kind of shows you up there, they're mainly close to the Y12 area with the landfills 4, 5, and 7 on the south side. M-Wolf and the new landfill EMDF is located down Bear Creek Valley to the west of Y12. It's not really shown here, but one thing that we have at the site is some roads. We simply call them haul roads, but that's used to transfer all of our waste from our sites to the landfill. That allows us to keep the trucks off of the public highway, which is a big safety advantage of doing that. So this photo or aerial photograph gives you a little close-up view of where the landfills actually are. That's the Y12 complex you can see there. And then the numbers 4, 5, and 7 are the 3 active ones there. There's some closed landfills 1, 2, and 6 shown in a blue color there. And then on down Bear Creek Valley is M-Wolf and EMDF. And there's a ridge there, Pine Ridge, that kind of separates those 2 lands from off-site area, which is about a mile to the north there. And from this photo where M-Wolf is and EMDF, you can see a road running between those. That's kind of that haul road that I was talking about in the previous. This goes to ETTP. I really like this photo here on the top left. It'll say us before we started the cleanup when all the buildings were there. And the bottom right now shows a photograph with all the buildings gone. And like I said, without the landfills on the site, I don't think we would have been to this point that we are to clean up the site, because if we weren't using on-site disposal, then all this waste would have been paid for to transfer off, and it's about double the cost to transport waste off-site versus on-site. And then again, like I said, safety before, if we weren't able to use the haul roads, keep it on off-site, then all these trucks would be hauling on private roads off-site. So this is a photo of M-Wolf here. It has 6 cells that receives waste. Those numbers showing up a little small, but from right to left, it's cells 1, and on the left side is 6. 1 through 5 is almost completely filled at this time, and we're mainly using 6 at this point. Again, the total capacity is 2.3 million cubic yards that this landfill can hold. When it was originally designed, it was designed at about 2.2, and about 5 years ago, we went through a process to change the design of the cap and so forth. That gave us an additional 100,000 cubic yards. So we went from 2.2 to 2.3. As I mentioned, 86% full. One of the big things to operate in landfills, though, is managing the water that comes off of them. That's actually one of the big areas that we spent a lot of time on. There's 4 ponds right there in the middle that you can see. That we refer to those as contact water ponds. Each one holds about 500,000 gallons of water. Off to the left, you can see that there's some contact water tanks also that holds about another 1 million gallons of water. And when I'm referring to contact water, that's water that hits the soil or the debris that's in the landfill and runs down the side and doesn't infiltrate on down and become leachate. For that water, what we do is we collect it and then we sample it. And if it meets release criteria, we release it to some of the local tributaries. Leachate, there's some tanks off to the right to those ponds that holds about 212,000 gallons of leachate. That's the water that soaks down through the waste to the collection system that's underneath the landfill. It goes there. We collect that, and we take tanker trucks and we take that to a treatment facility that's over OR&L for treatment. Again, we don't want to manage as much water as we have to. So you see a black cover there. That's a geomembrane liner. We have about half of the area that's covered under that, and that diverts the water so it doesn't come into contact waste, and that water is allowed to just strain on down into the ditches because it's never been in touch again with the waste. And that typically saves us about 20 million gallons of water a year that we don't have to manage by having that. So this is the projections of our waste in the future. The bottom part, the largest part, is the volume of the waste that we currently at the left side that we have used up in the space and the projection, of how much waste that we'll get up to FY 29 when we, fiscal year 29, when we expect the landfill to be full in the 29-30 time period. The middle portion there that looks like it stays about the same thickness, the yellowish orange color, that's some clean field. And what that was for is we're not allowed to have any voids in our space so that the landfill doesn't collapse. So early on, when we were disposing of debris, we had to use clean soil to fill in that space. But since we've moved on to doing a lot of soil cleanup, we're now able to use that soil in the voids. So that's why you don't really see it getting any thicker. It moves up. It's only the green that's moving. And then there's a small blue part up there. There's always uncertainty. So that's just a statistical calculation it uses to say, we may be off a little bit and may fill up earlier 2027, or it could be a little more, but that's for an uncertainty that we use. So I mentioned that, ETTP's cleaned up. So now we're moving on to the Y12 and ORNL. Actually, we have been moved over there for a while. These photos shows a lot of the buildings in red that are scheduled to come down at the sites. It's a little misleading. The scale's a little bit off for Y12 area, although there's fewer buildings shown there. Those are actually much larger buildings. So about 2/3 of the remaining waste will come from the Y12 area and about 1/3 of it from the ORNL site. Those buildings are, although there's more buildings, they're actually smaller buildings. So talking about expansion here, there was two main areas that we've been concentrating in the past few years of expanding. One is landfill 5. We went ahead back 2 years ago and we completed the expansion to take it out to its full capacity. The photo on the right shows where we did that work. On the right side there top, you can see the dirt face. That's the soil covering the waste materials since it's a sanitary landfill. The plastic there is actually not part of the liner system. The clay and the liner is all below that, but because it's going to be a while till we start putting waste, we put a plastic on top of it to shed the water off so that it wouldn't cause erosion and damage the landfill until we're ready to start putting waste. That'll be peeled back at that time. And then the next EMDF that I spoke about, that's the next one that we're been concentrating on. We really started back nearly a decade ago. We got the record of decision signed back in September 2022, and we've been making good progress. I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. But again, this one is very similar to MWolf in that its capacity will be about 2.2 million cubic yards. We have about a 25% contingency built into that, more than what we think that we'll need, but didn't want to go to all this trouble to construct it and then run out. But the way that it'll be designed is so that if we don't need that last capacity, we don't have to build that area out. So there's a major kind of defense in depth that we use in construction, especially of our circular landfills or all of our landfills that we want to make sure that they're operated safely. The first thing is the site selection, part of the record of decision. Feasibility study was looking at multiple locations. The location that was chosen, for example, for the site and characterization that we did, we installed 32 piezometers to measure water levels at the area. We did borings and did seismics to make sure that was seismic safe. And then another big area that I'll talk about in a minute is a groundwater field demonstration type characterization that we're doing for the design. It's part of the record of decision. The regulators had a concern that the water levels at the site may be higher than what we were predicting and showing that they would be at the site once the landfill is built. So DOE suggested and recommended that we do this demonstration so that the regulators would accept it. And so that's we'll use this work that we get from that to show where the water levels are. And I'll talk about that a little bit more on the next slide. Again, but then we go into the design. Again, this is a reference C design for the landfill at this site. Under DOE, we have a regulatory body also that requires to do this kind of performance assessment. They look at the design and so forth to make sure that it's safe, and that's outside the Oak Ridge office. That's individuals at other sites across the nation. Site operation, again, there's waste acceptance criteria to make sure only material that safely goes in there. We do a lot of sampling, of course, from any of the building demolitions, anything to verify that it can be disposed of the site. And then once the landfill is constructed under CERCLA, we'll continue to do 5-year reviews to make sure that it's still protective under the DOE regulations. That we also do what's called an annual summary report, where DOE members away from Oak Ridge reviews the material to make sure that the landfill is still being managed properly, in addition to monitoring wells to sample. So for EMDF, still, although we've started making good progress, it is still several years away before we'll be ready to start disposing of waste there. Again, as I talked about, there's 2 regulatory bodies. DOE has their own. We've already received what's referred to as disposal authorization statement, or preliminary one in this one, which gave us the authorization to construct the landfill. But then before we start disposing of waste, we have to go through one that's called an operational disposal and make sure that we constructed the landfill how we said we would. And then, of course, under the CERCLA process, we have multiple phases of this. The first part was early site preparation, and what that included really was we had to move one of the haul roads a little bit to the south. It went through the footprint of the landfill. We had to move Bear Creek Road to the south. We had to build a construction support area with our trailers for equipment, get a barrel area prepared. And that was all part of the early site prep, and all of that work's been completed. We had received regulatory approval for those documents back in 2023. Then there's the groundwater field demonstration that I spoke about that was required. We got approval through a different work plan to construct that. We completed that work on that back in December to start the monitoring that's required on that. As part of this, we have to do 2 wet season monitorings to monitor the water level before we can finalize the design. So once we get that done, then we'll move into the step of getting the design report approved by EPA and TDEC. We expect that design to be completed around 26, and then by the time we go through all the other business aspects, we're probably 2028 probably starting construction of the actual cells and the treatment facility. One of the difference for this landfill for MWolf, I talked about that we trucked the leachate to a treatment facility over at the National Lab. This facility will actually have its own treatment facility right on the site that'll treat the water there. And for this one, we're actually going to be treating the leachate and the contact water both, so all water through the treatment facility. And this photo here gives you a close-up of where we were at just a couple of months ago. On the left there, you can see that road that curls around there. That's the haul road. That's a gravel road. Bottom right corner, you can see a little bit. That's Bear Creek Road. Both of those roads used to be more to the northeast in that photo going right through the site. Near the one, we constructed some sedimentation ponds for the site. But the big green area there, again, that's part of the groundwater field demonstration. I brought some samples here and start passing those out as I talked about them. But for a groundwater field demonstration, the purpose of it was that we wanted to cut off the recharge to the site so the water levels will be kind of like we'll see once the landfill is actually designed with the liner at the site. What that is there's a geomembrane liner that's underneath the green artificial turf that you see there, and there's a sand that's on top of that, and it simply sheds the water off. And we're seeing good results at this time. Water levels are dropping at the site as we expected. So seeing a good sign. And I think this is the last slide. One of the things that we've been dedicated to is making sure that we try to have a lot of outreach early on in this project, which began back in 2015. We had meetings, and as part of the record decision and CERCLA process, we were required to have public meetings. We've had those, but even since we got past those, we're continuing to have a lot of meetings as well. The public to come and hear about the work. Mainly about once a year, there's sessions that currently ongoing before we talk about all the cleanup on the reservation. But one of the areas that I've been talking about, it's for EMDF. So I think that was the last slide. So that was on the presentation. I'll open up for questions unless somebody else from EM would like to add anything.
Thank you for the presentation. Ms. Layton, that was good. We have any questions from the board? Be online?
Let me ask one timeline question. Wells and water level testing, is that underway?
Yes, it is. We completed putting the system in place back at the beginning of December, and we've started collecting continuous water levels at the site since those. And that'll continue through the end of the wet season in 2026. It will be required by the record decision to do 2 years. So we're getting them from all the wells, and we're seeing a decline in the water levels at the wells that are underneath the cover. The wells that are outside the cover are going up at this time. So that's a good sign of what we wanted to see, that this would. And the main reason of that is because by the record of decision, we're required to have a 15-foot separation between the bottom of the waste to the top of the seasonal high water table.
Thinking you're glad you're not in Nashville.
Yes.
Notes? To the public? Luther?
Yes, Luther Gibson, former member of the board. Recently, it was reported by Kairos Power that they generated a lot of soil, concrete, and underground electrical stuff after they got in there and started doing their site prep. Are you having to take responsibility for any of that material? Was there sampling done, found hot spots or anything like that?
So yeah, correct. Kairos did do a lot of excavation for the design of their facility. The test reactors will be subsurface. They did run into some material that was left behind. Concrete monoliths that were part of the foundation of the K3133 building. That whole area had been cleared under the record decision agreed to by the TDEC, EPA, and DOE, and the work had been finished. Obviously, it's literally impossible to, without going out and excavating every last square inch of soil to make sure you've gotten everything. And under CERCLA, DOE is responsible in perpetuity for anything that is left behind.
That implies pretty extensive.
Answer.
Yeah.
Can I finish?
No, one of the things, that implies that you're having to provide continuous oversight of the work in perpetuity, right? I'm sorry.
Part of the agreement is there are land use controls. They have to submit a excavation penetration permit before they do any work on the property out there.
Okay.
They did that.
Okay.
But even with that, there are still, you cannot characterize every square foot of property. And so yes, they did run into some piping that was left behind that had lead joints. The lead is a hazardous contaminant, so we have to take responsibility for that material.
Okay, I appreciate the land use controls are in there and they're working then. That's takeaway then.
Yep.
Do you foresee EMWMF being turned over to Office of Legacy Management at some point for?
You want to take that one? No? Okay. We have worked with Legacy Management in the past to try to transfer parts of the reservation over to them where we have finished work. It turned out to be a very difficult task. And so we have backed off of that for right now. The intent is to turn over large sections of the reservation once we're done. But it will be a while before we have the property in the state where LM will accept it. And there are some challenges that aren't necessarily related to cleanup. One that we still have yet to tackle is, for instance, and you'll see this when we go on a tour, at ETTP, there are 2 areas that are historical classified burial grounds. And for security reasons, those will remain DOE property in perpetuity. That also means that you have to have people that have clearances to address those. You have to maintain security to watch those. At this point in time, LM doesn't have that mechanism in place. They don't administratively have a way of handling that, so they cannot take those. So for the foreseeable future, until that situation's done, those burial grounds will remain in EM ownership. And then, of course, we'll talk about later in future presentations. We're still working on our groundwater efforts at ETTP until those become more mature. ELM is not prepared to take the property. And a lot of the property is already transferred to private ownership. So there's a lot of property that just will fall outside of LM. Hopefully in the end, there won't be that much for them to actually take over. But that is philosophically, it is the objective. It's to transfer all of our cleanup property that we can't transfer to private entities, transfer that to LM. But it's very difficult at this point to say when that actually will happen.
And I had Roger too, because small areas, it's not cost effective since we already have a presentation.
Yeah.
So it's.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I didn't mean to be disrespectful. I was trying to get that point across
Yeah.
earlier.
Yeah.
All right.
No, it's a good question that we deal with frequently. So.
Anyone else, any guests have any questions regarding this topic? Is there anyone online?
No one said anything online.
There will be, we'll continue. You can ask questions online, accepted by email. All right. Do we have any other topics or concerns for DOE or the board?
Comment, public comment.
Any public comment?
Recognized. Public comment. I'm Luther Gibson. I'm a former member and chair of the SSAB. I retired in 2017 with over 40 years experience as a dual form contractor employee in land enrichment, environmental management, and national nuclear security administration programs. And I might claim 8 additional years of experience since, but without W-2 to show for it. Piques your interest, PIQUES, word of the day. Piques your interest refers to a situation that gets your attention and makes you want to learn more. I've become increasingly concerned that correspondence among the federal facility agreement parties that is publicly available is not sufficiently piquing public interest in the issues and important details surrounding the projects, or even if some projects are underway. Copies of this correspondence are restricted to the SSAB, the DOE Information Center, through the administrative record transmittals, and local government officials who may share it. A local official that chairs the Oak Ridge Reservation Communities Alliance posts correspondence involving TDEC and DOE on that organization's website. She once asked me if I read and understood them. I said something to the effect that more background information helps. When I was SSAB chair, I would meet with staff prior to each monthly board meeting and go through every item received, referring it to committee chairs, having a copy for the board meeting packet, or assuring its availability was noted in incoming correspondence log. And one area where I see a lot of lead time for comments involvement is in some remedial investigation work plans. They provide a lengthy window during which there's exchange of comments and milestone extension requests as matters are resolved or not. Although I could go through a long list, just some of the recent activities that have piqued my interest in topics not in the work plan include, after about a year of interaction among the FFA parties, a real investigation work plan for White Wing Scrapyard was rescinded for a time-critical removal action to facilitate early property transfer. Now, a time-critical removal action usually applies to situations where activities must begin within 6 months of discovering contamination in order to protect public health and safety. What gives here needs to be explained, including any schedule impact on the commercial, any schedule impact on the project this is facilitating. The action memorandum under which DOE will proceed, but without TDEC and EPA signatures, should be interesting. And also had my interest piqued in there was a comment letter on the appendix I-5 information assessment for the same, what we scratch rate project. But it piqued my interest in what the I-5, appendix I-5 with the FFA says about how assessment of potential environmental impacts from classified contaminants must be considered while proceeding through the FFA decision-making process. Now, I've been involved on the classified end up too, doing permits and emergency management documents, so I know something about this. I just think it needs to be trustable, a project over the public. And then recently there was a D1 draft of a remedial investigation work plan for the Bear Creek Valley Burial Ground that was transmitted, and it's out there for review, not being looked at to my knowledge. And there's an update of the public development plan, maybe more comment about that later. Thank you.
Do you have any requests for new action items? Any additions to the meeting? Meeting is May 14th, fiscal year 27, budget development input, 6 o'clock. Motion to approve the agenda.
In this part of our meeting.
It's about that in this part then? Sure.
That ends our presentation part.
Okay,
Shelley got her back to you.
okay. No action items. That were done.
Correct.
Okay,
We don't have any open.
all right, that ends the presentation portion. You're free to leave any of the presenters. Thank you.
Thanks a
Thank
lot.
Feel free to reach back out
Yeah.
if you.
As a note, before we get into board business, we are currently short of a quorum, so we'll have to pass on.
Even if you count everybody.
Yeah. We've only got 11. So we'll have to pass on approving the board minutes, but we can go into reports.
Jump into the report, Ms. Hunt. Responses to recommendations, DDFO's report.
We don't currently have any recommendations in front of DOE. I did want to point out something particular to the new members. If you go up to section 3, we're right under the presentation, we have the issue group. That is anybody who is interested in this particular topic who would like to be a part of the issue group. You just need to let Shelley know, Shelley or Sarah know, and they will add you to the issue group. What this issue group will do is they will have an email conversation amongst each other to talk about questions they have about the presentations, to talk about potential recommendations and that type of thing. So if you're interested in being on the issue group for this topic, just let Sarah and Shelley know and they will add you to it. The other quick note I wanted to make was that on 4/23, we have the next EM chairs meeting. That's going to be a virtual event. We're not going to be traveling for that. This is the follow-up meeting. We had this in October, which some of our new members actually got to attend also. But if you would like to attend that meeting, it's going to be a virtual option. Shelley and Sarah have sent out information on that link. If you missed it in your email, reach out to them and they can get that information. Because it's virtual, everybody, the whole board is able to sit in and listen to it. Not only our chair and vice chair will be actually able to present, but you're able to sit in and watch if you're interested. So just let Sarah and Shirley know if you've not seen that email come through. And that's all I have, Chris.
One note for those issue groups, if you'll look in your packet, right past the meeting minutes, the work plan is in there. And so you are free to choose any issue group from the upcoming meetings. So that would be this meeting as well as May, June, and September.
And you can be on as many issue groups as you want to.
We'd like everyone to at least pick one.
We had our executive meeting May the 7th. We discussed, meeting early for the new members. And, also there was discussion around the EM stewardship meeting. It's going to be overlapping with the SSAB chairs. And I'll let Mr. Charles Moore talk about that. I think we need to talk about that a little.
Yeah, we talked a little bit about that, and overall, I'm of the consensus that a meeting for this month is not warranted.
Have any additions to the agenda? I do want to say that the chairs is going to be online, and I'd encourage you to get on there. It's really interesting. You can learn a lot about the other sites and some of the national things that go on. So if you have time and can log into that, get on there. It really is a good thing to watch. I learned a lot from it. All right. Vote the meeting.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion.
Move that we adjourn.
Second.
All right. First, second. Favor.
Aye.
Thank you.